In 1848 Paris, revolution is in the air and spies are everywhere. Chopin's piano tuner sees everything and answers to no one until he's finally forced to choose a side. I'm Carol Cram, host of the Art and Fiction podcast, and today my guest is Nancy Burkhalter, author of The Education of Delhomme. Welcome to the Art and Fiction podcast, Nancy.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I'm just delighted to be able to chat with you about one of my very favorite composers, Chopin. I have
Mhm.
been playing his music since I was a teenager, so that was one of the many reasons I was drawn to The Education of Delhomme. So, give us a quick overview of the novel, what it's about, when it's set, some of the major characters in it.
Well, Chopin was born in 1810
Mhm.
and he died young at 1849. He was, what, 39 years old, so he was pretty young. He was pretty sick all of his life. And I designed the book because I absolutely adored Chopin and thought, well, he had to have a piano tuner. He had to because it takes a long time to learn how to do it. And I had been listening to him while I was learning how to tune pianos and do action repairs and things like that. So that's when I created the main character, the main narrator is Delhomme, Beaulieu Delhomme. So the book centers around Delhomme and how he just adores Chopin and wants to meet him and does all sorts of things to try to get to. But he was very poor himself. He didn't have a lot of money. So he fell prey to a spy for the monarchy because they wanted to know not necessarily about Chopin, but they wanted to know about Georges Sand, who was his lover, who was really this firebrand and wrote all sorts of awful things about the monarchy. So they wanted to get a foot in the door about what she was doing, what's she writing about, and where is she going to publish it. And so, because he was so poor, the spy, the liaison between the monarchy and him, Vidocq, his name is, bought him off. So here he was in love with Chopin, but having to be a spy into his life, it just set up a real turmoil in him.
So the novel started with Chopin because you love Chopin, and then you needed a way into to writing about Chopin. So
Oh,
that's something that really intrigued me about your novel is how you brought together fact and fiction, because obviously Chopin and Georges Sand and Vidocq and Berlioz, so many real people in your novel. I loved your notes at the end of the book. But Delhomme, of course, is fictional. So what are
mm.
some of the challenges that you face taking the real and the fictional and putting them together?
Well, getting the timeline down. I had
Yes.
a big tablet that I had made a timeline on, and that I stuck to faithfully and had to really make sure that I wasn't talking about something of an event that had preceded another one, and this person had been born before that one. Maybe every historical novelist faces that, but and then even every novelist that you have to make sure that you're on track with all of that. Otherwise, your reader goes just doesn't understand. So that how I kept on track with the historical events, I had that above, and then what was happening in the novel below. So that was my best tool to deal with the history. And of course, I'm not a historian and I'm not particularly well versed in the French Revolution or any of the other events that happened in France. And so I had to read. And again, that's not news to anyone who does any kind of historical writing. How did I blend them? I don't know. Just sort of came about. I'm not the kind of writer who plans.
Mhm.
And danger lies ahead when you do that kind of thing.
I know.
I know I used to have a teacher who wrote all these mysteries and murder mysteries and stuff. And he used to have a bulletin board that had one, two, and three acts, right? And each act had a bunch of post-it notes, like however many scenes he had or chapters he had in act one. And then each, maybe they were yellow, but where the scenes had action, he would put pink ones. So I'm thinking, wow, you really had to know what you were doing. So it's kind of like, oh, you just take dictation after that when you know everything else is going to happen. So I never did that. I can never do that kind of thing. I'm a pantser, I guess they call that.
Yeah,
So,
I get it.
but that to me, that's the thrill. You know, a lot of writers will say, especially when their characters are known to them really well, that the characters sort of take over and they don't have to really do, oh, but that person wouldn't really do that. And it's kind of gives you a structure that comes about without you really planning on it. It's
It's
a
organic.
miracle of writing. I absolutely adore that about writing, discovery.
I agree. I think it is the discovery that we love so much. It's the process, right? And not knowing what's going to happen. I'm more like you. I'm a little bit more of a pantser than an outliner, although then you get into trouble sometimes when you don't know what's going to happen. But I want to talk a little bit about Delhomme himself because he's an interesting kind of anti-hero character. He's not all that sympathetic in some ways. I mean, he takes money to spy on his friends, really. Although, yeah, well, I won't say no spoilers, but how did you kind of manage with a character that really isn't very sympathetic in a lot of ways? Or is that what you intended?
I didn't, well, there we go to that intention thing. I didn't have much intention going on. I really liked him. I felt sorry for him that he didn't have money, I mean, I didn't know what else he could have done in that situation. His father had been so mean to him and because he wanted him to go to medical school and he fought to do what he really wanted to do. Um, that's interesting you call him an anti-hero. I don't know. I never thought of him that way.
Okay,
He,
that's
he just
interesting.
he was just doing what he had to do.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's not particularly laudable in a lot of ways, but as you say, how much choice did he really have? And so, related to that is you really brought out the history of this period. This is the sort of the time of Les Mis, isn't it? The 1840s, the barricades and everything. It
Mm.
was wonderful how you portrayed Paris at that time and just how difficult life must have been for so many people and the workers' rights and the politics. And so that was fascinating. And a lot of that, of course, is George Sand. So tell us a little bit about George Sand, who's someone I hate to say I don't know as much about as I feel I should.
Well, here's another interesting story about that in terms of what I discovered as I wrote the book is Chopin was I think he, from an early age, like 20 or something like that, began to show signs of an illness. And it turned out to be TB. And my doctor friend said it was cardiac something, inflammation of cardiac sac and stuff like that. Anyway, he was very frail. And so he happens upon Georges Sand, who's kind of an opportunist, but she liked to be surrounded by all these really interesting people because she herself was, wow, I mean, she was really fantastic. She wrote from midnight until 6 in the morning every night. And then she dealt with her kids and stuff like that. So you have to admire her passion that way. But she ended up dumping him. I mean, they were together something like 9 years,
Yeah.
and she dumped him and I was so mad at her. I said, I don't like George Sand. And then I thought, Nancy, she's a character in your book. Come
Yeah.
on, get over it. So then another interesting thing happened that turned my view of her around. I went to her home in central France. It's called Nohant.
Yeah.
And I was so charmed by the way she had decorated it. And she had had a separate place. I probably talk about this in the book, but she had a separate place for where her son could put on puppet shows.
Oh, yeah,
And
I don't remember
she,
that part.
yeah, she made clothes for these puppets. And so it was a little stage, right, with a proscenium arch and stuff. And I thought, you know, I I just, you just have to take her for who she is. I mean, she was a dedicated, artistic person who felt very passionate about her politics and wrote about it, violence or repercussions be damned. I mean, she just didn't really care. And I kind of like that. So I came away thinking differently about her. And, but that's why I needed to give her a voice too. I realized that. So that's why I sprinkled out her diary entries.
Which I really enjoyed. Yeah, that was a smart thing to do because Delhomme's version of George Sand is not particularly complimentary. He doesn't like her
No.
for most of the novel.
Well, they were
And
in competition for
yes,
Chopin's
for Chopin.
attention, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So another thing, of course, your background is you're a piano tuner. So that must have been very interesting, taking something that you have a skill at and putting it into your novel. Because I'm a pianist, so I found that fascinating how pianos are tuned. So tell us a little bit how you took what you knew and put it into the novel, and not too much. And how do you do that?
Oh, that's an interesting thing too, because I was worried about that. I think, let's not go on and on about this, Nancy. People don't really care too much about how a soundboard is made, but I thought those who would be interested would be at least interested in that amount. How did I take it? I really just decided that I would give a just a taste of what his life was like, because that's what my life used to be like.
Yeah.
I was a tuner for many, many years. I put myself through graduate school with no loans at all. And I can't figure out why everybody doesn't have some kind of survival skill like that, because I went on to get two master's degrees and a
Mhm.
PhD and stuff like that. And so, anyway, he wasn't really big presence. I don't know how else to say that, but he was kind of self-effacing, and he was
Yeah.
somebody who, he had scruples, but he had to worry about that and do away with them, and if he was going to survive, right? So, and then the tuning part, I mean, I think historical fiction readers are a breed apart. They like to
That
learn.
is true. That is very true. Yeah.
They like to learn. And I kept that in my mind. And I said, okay, if you're going to talk about the A before middle C vibrating at 440 cycles per second, you're just going to have to say that, right? You just can't gloss over that. You have to say it. And I have a whole explanation about, because everyone thinks, oh, you've got perfect pitch then. And no, I don't, because it's too imprecise. A person who perceives an A below middle C at 440s, what they think an A is, it can be 435, it can be 400, and it's not what we need to deal with. Actually, another thing that people say is, oh, you must play. You must play.
Yeah.
Well, I did take piano lessons for a long time, but I'm not anything to write home about. So what I say to them is, you know, a car mechanic doesn't need to know how to drive.
That is true. Yeah.
They don't need to know anything about that. It's nice if they can get in a car and try it out, which is what I used to do after I would tune. Actually, I would play some Chopin. And so I had to use a light touch on that because it's pretty dry stuff.
Well, it worked out well, and maybe because I am a pianist, I loved the pianos were almost like other characters in the novel. I mean, you kind of started caring about these, like when somebody put a glass on the piano, you were just like Delhomme, you're going, oh, no, don't do that. So you kind of let the readers understand that they are almost living things. They're wood and they expand and they contract. And so I thought that was fascinating. I got a wonderful appreciation for this incredible instrument that I play every day, but
Oh,
I
good.
don't know what goes on underneath the hood. So that was wonderful. Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Well,
And
I wanted to also say that having been a piano tuner for so many years informed a lot of what I did in there. For instance, he walks into Chopin's apartment and the piano's near the fireplace. And of course, any tuner would just
oh, yeah.
practically pass out because of the infraction of having done that. It's kind of fun because I mean, Delhomme was really me, let's put it this way. And I could guide him based on what a lot of my experiences were and reactions from clients and things like that. So it's a very personal book for me
Yes, I would
because of
imagine.
that. Because of
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
So did
Yeah,
you
it's
think of it?
I know I thought that. Yeah, no, it's okay. Well, I was actually thinking, would it be the case that Chopin would have a dedicated tuner like Delhomme? Did you know who his tuner was?
I do know. I do know who
Ah,
he was. And
interesting.
I found that out because, and this is the researcher in me because I've been a researcher for a long time. I was in the University of Washington Library and I found a book. It was very thin. It was written by the daughter of Chopin's tuner.
No way.
Yeah, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I mean, everybody else would think, oh, okay, that's nice, Nancy. But
When an
it's,
historical novelist gets it,
oh,
that's
oh
wonderful.
yeah. Oh, it was great. I knew the name of him, but I forget what it is now. But yeah, it was a thrill, and he was a tough customer. Chopin was, of course. Every pianist has different druthers in terms of touch and how bright they want the treble to sound or how mellow or something like that. The advanced pianist like Chopin was, and the kinds of things he wanted to do with the keyboard as opposed to Liszt, who was like a pounder and he was a showman, and then everyone would complain about Chopin being too soft, but
Yeah.
that's the way he played.
Yes.
And so he would want an action, the keys that would be very responsive.
Yeah.
And so a tuner would have to know that.
Your novel has sent me back to Chopin. I've got to go and play. I'm not good enough to play Chopin well, but I can play some nocturnes and stuff. But it was just so interesting to read about how he did things and that he was unwell. So it was soft in places. I remember my own piano teacher saying to me one time, he was not a well man. You have to take that into account when you're playing Chopin. And that always stuck with me. And then there it is in your novel. So your novel is also kind of part thriller. And you say you don't plot, but did you know how the kind of thriller part would end up, the spy part?
No, I didn't. I don't remember having that much of a insight into what was going to happen. I knew once I found the spymaster, Vidocq, and I have to say that I did that by looking. I thought, I should have some kind of spy in here, some element that sort of puts Delhomme in danger. So there was this great book by a guy named Nash. It's called Spies, and it's like a dictionary of spies throughout history. And I found
Really?
him again, serendipity. I couldn't believe he was in the same time period and what a character he was. He fell into my lap. I couldn't have made up anybody better than he
Yeah.
was.
I didn't know he was real until I read the end.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, he was quite an operator and he
Yeah.
had, even from an early age, his father had some, I guess it was like a store, dry goods store or something, and he would put the money in a box. The father would put the money in the box with a slit. So Vidocq would come along with a stick with chewing gum on the end and dip it in and take the money out like that. That's the kind of guy he was, just from an early age. So once I knew there was a spy in there and there was some
Yeah.
intrigue between the monarchy, and that was kind of the accelerant,
Yeah.
if you will, for the rest of the book.
Worked well because there's a lot of different threads to this novel. There was the music, but there was also the politics, and then George Sand, and yeah, so it was very interesting novel to read. Like
Oh,
I
good.
found it hard to put down just because
Oh,
there's a lot in it. Yeah, no, I highly recommend it to all my listeners. So, would you like to do a short reading for us, Nancy?
absolutely. I'm going to read off my computer.
That's
So,
fine. That's good.
well, I have to say that I don't know if you could properly call the ring, because Chopin had a ring that was given to him when he was 15, when he performed for some czar. And it's a real ring. I mean, I even contacted the Chopin Museum in Warsaw about it, and they said they can't find it, but yes, there was a ring. So I don't know if you can properly call that like a MacGuffin, but that was like something that it was kind of his way of relating to Chopin and wanting something of his. And anyway, I mean, he wasn't gay. I mean, as far as I know. Delhomme wasn't, but he was really jealous of Chopin's attention. And Sand comes along and he has a real contretemps with her. I don't know if Sand really knew that. She probably did. But this scene follows after Chopin has told Delhomme that he wants to give Sand the ring. The following Sunday, I donned my coat and cap for a walk in the Jardin des Tuileries. It was a fine late October day. I stepped lively down the paths and reveled in the children's gleeful squeals and the whooshing of the fountains. I'd been walking in reverie for half an hour when I heard my name. I turned toward the voice. Monsieur Chopin and Madame Sand sat together on a green wooden bench. She wore an attractive honey-colored dress and a blue bonnet tied under her chin. I could not help wondering if pantaloons lurked under those crinolines. He, as always, was immaculately dressed in a black morning coat and top hat. His butter-yellow gloves were only a shade off Madame Sand's dress. A handsome couple, I had to admit. He introduced me. Bonjour, madame, I said brightly. I bowed and reached out to kiss her hand, but she offered none. She kept them crossed on her lap in a ladylike manner. I saw no ring. Please, said the pianist, motioning me over, come sit a while. We chatted about the wonderful weather and happy sunshine. Chopin pulled the conversation to pianos. I hope you don't mind, Georges, he said to her, but I know Delhomme would love to hear about the Bösendorfer. She smiled weakly. Chopin became increasingly animated as he recounted the tale of the expensive Viennese piano he had been eager to play. Its owner had bought it from a dealer there who said it was one of the first manufactured. I expected to hear a report about its majestic sound and unique Austrian touch. Chopin said the audience members had been treated to meats and fruits and cheeses from all over France, along with oceans of alcohol. I was not terribly hungry due to my nerves, he said, so I went to the hall and began playing Bach, as I usually do. No sooner had I sat down than the drunkest man I have ever met came teetering over to the piano. He reached over my shoulder to play something, but slipped on the rug, and there went his wine all over the keyboard. I gasped. Alcohol in a piano action was its death knell. Of course, I reported it to the hostess, he said. She said she had another instrument that the children practiced on. Oh, yes, I know that one, I said, in the sunroom, an upright. But I did not tune. Mon Dieu, he interrupted, putting his hands to his forehead. Delhomme, it was so out of tune that I could not even recognize what I was playing. I'm so sorry, I said, touching his arm. George's eyes locked onto my hand, which I withdrew forthwith. He continued, now Liszt, he said of his composer friend, Liszt would have just gotten up and walked away, snob that he is. Frankly, I found the Hungarian a bit boorish in that regard. Chopin was too well bred for such churlishness. I laughed with him, but his levity seemed forced, as if to say, look how happy Georges makes me. I remained unconvinced. Madame Sand maintained her icy facade. A short silence left an opening to leave. I rose and said, it will be dark soon. I'll be on my way then. I turned to Georges. Delighted to have met you, madame. She said nothing. This encounter taught me that hostility need not arrive on the backs of words. Couples and families gazed at the deep red sunset. I headed east into the darkening sky. The idea of Chopin giving his diamond ring to that trouser-wearing, arrogant, ill-mannered slut turned my stomach. And the prospect of his marrying her, why, I retched at the thought.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I'm glad that you read that because I loved his opinion of George Sand. It was refreshing. So I said, I don't know actually much about her, but now I have to read more. So my one of my reasons for doing the art and fiction podcast is to inspire other authors. So you, like me, have come to writing novels a bit later in our careers. You had a career, several careers, it sounds like, before you became a writer. What kind of advice would you give to people who want to write historical fiction?
Well, I think find good teachers. I would not have been able to write what I did unless I had taken a 2 year manuscript completion class for literary fiction through the University of Washington Extension. His name is Scott Driscoll. He still teaches. He's absolutely the best. And of course, I would go in with my chapter thinking this is the best thing since sliced bread. And then I would read it, and then the class would react, and then Scott would have his say. And of course, it was torn to shreds. And I'd walk out with my shoulders stooped and thinking, I'll never do this. But that's what you want. You
Yeah,
want that.
but you do want it. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've written a lot of academic journal articles and dissertations. I said, how hard could fiction be? Well, it's famous last words.
Probably
It's
difficult.
incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredibly difficult, yes. And I also have to tag on to that. I do not believe in workshops. One
Mhm.
workshop here, one workshop there. No, you need a consistent critique of what it is that you're doing so that you can get the critique on chapter one, blend that advice into chapter two,
Okay.
and so on. You have to have consistency as that. I mean, I've had a lot of workshops and they were all great, but there's a fabric to a book, and a workshop only gets at one little thread of it.
Yeah.
So you need somebody to really be able to teach you how to imbricate all of the ideas and get them straight. And, each scene, actually, that was one of the most important things I learned was how to shape a scene.
Okay.
I've looked at other people's work and I say, where is your scene goal? And they say, well, what's that? And
Yeah.
I said, well, do you get in your car and just drive, or do you have a plan for when you go in your car? And are you, and it became clear to them that that was something that they had to do. It's like you're taking the reader as a partner, right? You
Mhm.
have to take them, okay, we're going to look at now how he became a piano tuner, or whatever it is that you're going to reveal in that scene. It's everything. It's the skeleton, it's the building blocks of what it is that you have to do. And it's what you have to keep the reader interested,
It's
right?
very true that every scene must have a goal. When I learned that, it was I don't necessarily know that when I'm doing a first draft, but certainly when you get to the
Mhm.
second, third, and 10th draft. But that's good advice about you get it finding a manuscript intensive program. I have not done that yet, and sometimes I think maybe I should. Because even with I'm on my sixth or seventh one now, and it's no easier than it was when the first one.
Yeah, I know it doesn't get any. I mean, some things are a little easier, like you have to know about scene goal, for instance, and
Yeah.
also a critique group is also invaluable.
Yes. Yeah, I
But you
like
have to
those.
have people who are not going to, mow you down.
No, it's a
There's
balance. Yeah, there has to be mutual
right.
respect. And I
Yes,
and I do
yes,
find that a critique group where you're with authors that are kind of the same level as you, they're doing this, they don't even have
yeah.
to do the same genre, but they're kind of at the same level in their careers or something. Like not someone who's a complete beginner. I find that that helps to have someone that sort of gets where you are,
Yes, and choose wisely. That's all I have to say is
for
they
sure.
can, yeah.
So, what are you working on now, if you would like to share?
Well, I have completed and I'm on the hunt for an agent. It's a book about Franz Anton Mesmer,
Oh,
who, if you know the verb to mesmerize, that's where it comes from because he's the precursor to hypnosis.
yeah, interesting.
It's a biographical historical novel and about his quest to gain acceptance into the medical community. He was a doctor himself. and he wanted to get the imprimatur of the Viennese medical school. And then, anyway, so he developed this pain-free treatment as
Yeah.
opposed to leeches. And they even used electrocution in medicine and bleeding and all these really painful things that a lot of people said, well, I don't really feel any better. But so people flocked to him. They absolutely adored him because he was really working on the subconscious. I don't think he knew any of this, but somehow he had an intuition about what his healing practices were. And so it's about that and his journey to try to get acceptance. He never did. But the big picture here is that that's the way the medical community still is. And I've talked to chiropractors, I've talked to naturopaths and people who are now known as the fringes, and
Yes.
how they may sort of want to wheedle their way into maybe they would be a doctor would refer them to, let's say, a chiro. No, 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 no. Never happens. Never happens. And so they circle the wagons. My son's a doctor, and I've told him all about this. Believe me, I've argued a lot about this. And I said, you know, and it was very frustrating for him. And he died, of course, in ignominy and not with much money. But some people who saw what was what was worthwhile in his
Yeah.
techniques took them and eventually ended up with Freud and hypnosis and that
So
kind
he
of
was the
thing.
beginning of hypnosis and the subconscious and the work that Freud did. So
Yeah,
psychology. Oh,
yes.
interesting. What was Mesmer? What was this period?
Uh,
19th century.
he was born, I think, in 1724 and died in 1810.
Oh, it's earlier than I thought. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So the Age of Reason, the Enlightenment era.
exactly, exactly. So there was Benjamin Franklin gets into the act here
Ah,
because he was, the king actually asked, Franklin was the ambassador to France and he
yeah.
was the little darling of everybody there. And so King Louis the 16th said, look, this guy Mesmer, we're not so sure about him. Why don't you get together a commission and set up some experiments and we'll see what comes out of that to see if what he thinks is going on is really going on. So Franklin heads that commission and Lavoisier, who is very famous in the sciences because he discovered oxygen and the microscope and things like that. He was the one that designed all these experiments. So I got that idea from a psychologist friend of mine who said, you ought to look into Mesmer. And I said, okay, when somebody mentions it to you as a writer, okay, I'll look into it.
Yeah, right.
And then he mentioned it again. I said, okay, I will. And so I did a little poking around. Yeah,
Wow.
I was
So it
hooked.
takes place in Paris then, that
Yeah,
novel.
well, mostly it takes place a little bit in Vienna and then also in Paris. And then he leaves. He was German. And so he
So I
went
was
back
thinking
to
in Vienna, they had the first insane asylum, right? Which is what, 1770,
Mm.
1780. I went there, the narrator. I actually set a scene there in my second novel. So it was
Oh,
fascinating. So he probably would have known about that if he was into the subconscious and all that kind of stuff.
well,
It was,
interesting that you should say that, Carol, because I have, well, he didn't really have a sister, but I made up a sister who was really my grandmother, who was mentally ill and had
mm,
what is now called schizophrenia. So
yeah,
she is in the real famous Salpêtrière, which is in France. It's in Paris. It's the really, really famous now. Well, it was back then like a mental institution, but
yeah.
it was where a lot of women were put who the society didn't know what to do with.
Oh, interesting.
Unwed mothers, crooks, 10,000 people were in this hospital, and that's where she was. So also have scenes in there, so I'd be interested in that.
Grim.
So,
Well, I know
yeah,
the narrator was actually the first insane asylum in about 80 or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Have you been to Vienna? Because you can actually
Yes,
go.
but a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the
Um,
University of Vienna's campus, and it's round. It looks exactly the same. And I went there, and I went upstairs and met the director, and he showed me the cells, and creepy, but it was wonderful. Of course, as you know, as a novelist, there's nothing better than going to the places where your novels are set. I
That's
presume,
another piece of advice. Yes,
yeah,
go. And if you can't, use Google Earth or something like
yes,
that, but still, that's several shades away. Yes, go. And take a video camera if you can too, because
yeah,
that
that's a
really
good
helps.
idea. Yeah, you get the
Yeah,
sounds as well. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just off to England in a few weeks, so I'll be doing some
Oh,
research while I'm there. Yeah,
ah,
Historical Novel Society conference in Dublin. Yeah,
in Dublin. Oh
yeah,
God.
that'll be fun. Yeah, I know.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
I'm on a panel at the conference. Yeah, so I'm going to the UK for a few weeks and then over to Dublin for the conference. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, that's
oh, that's great.
exciting.
Well, I mean, nothing energizes you more than to see but you have to have written something, I think,
Yeah,
beforehand before it can be meaningful, before when you go. But when I was doing my reading for it, I would collect all these books and then I would read. And then as things gelled in my head, I would read something and then I would get up and kind of sketch out a scene. Whether I used it again was immaterial. It's just that I was thinking about different things. And I was surprised at how much I actually ended up using. So
yeah.
that sped up my writing and my focus for where I wanted to go.
How long did it take you to write this novel? Because there was a lot of research.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an odd question because I'm not one of these people who have, 8 o'clock to noon, and I'm not.
Yeah,
I do it when I
I
have
wish I
pockets.
was, but yeah,
Yeah, well, I do it when I have pockets of time. So, maybe 2 years, maybe
yeah.
three. Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Which
Oh,
takes a long time.
here's another piece of advice. When you find a book about your topic that is written by somebody who's living, one would hope. I mean, the author is still living. Get in touch with that person. They love it.
Do. I love experts. They're the best. And they really like historical novelists, in my experience, anyway. I've never
Mine,
found one.
I sent my book to the one, and he wrote
Yeah,
me a blurb. So
yeah. Yeah, no, I've always had really good luck with experts. They are
yeah,
great. Because often a lot of historians kind of would like to be historical novelists, but they're not. So
yeah.
I just find them fascinating. Thank you so much for chatting with me, Nancy.
Well, I'm pretty high after all of this. It's so much fun to talk about my writing. As you know, we're cloistered all day long, and finally somebody said, "What are you writing about?" And then that's the end of what they have to say. So thank you.